So two of our panellists, I think we've already met. Nick and Jette are joining us again. But I'd also like to introduce two other panellists to join us in the discussion about virtual pay TV operators, Philippe and Jeroen. If I could ask you very quickly to give a one-minute introduction to you and what you do for the audience, that would be
Yes, sure. I'm Philippe Steinmetz. I work for Orange France, so the French business unit of Orange. I'm assuming you guys know Orange. I hope so. We're the incumbent in France anyway. So we're the #1 broadband and TV and mobile provider in France. And in that unit, I work in marketing, and I'm heading the pay TV and SVOD offers.
Thank you. And Jeroen?
I'm Jeroen Ghijsen, CEO of Metrological. And Metrological is a company who brings together OTT with the live TV streams in a seamless manner.
Thank you very much. So we're discussing virtual pay TV operators. So actually returning to the first session of today, so perhaps touching on some of what Tony discussed. Now, just so we're all on the same page, I guess my initial question to the panel will be, well, what would you consider a virtual TV operator? What makes it different to a traditional pay TV operator or to a subscription video on demand service like Netflix? So any takers on that? Yeah, I mean, Jette, we spoke last week about something.
Yeah, I guess a virtual pay TV operator is a little bit like a hybrid between a traditional pay TV operator and an on-demand service or an SVOD service. I'm hesitant to say that it's the best of two worlds, though. I think you are not, surely today at least, getting what you get in a pay TV offering or in an SVOD offering and such, so I see it as something different. I mean, from MTG's side, we are not a virtual pay TV operator, so we have quite distinct offerings. So we have our pay TV offering where you get everything, you get the best in sport, so it's like the Sky offerings. We have all the best sports rights, and we have the originals that we produce, we have our reality shows, and we have first and second pay windows. And then, of course, and that is priced around, I don't know, $85 a month. And then we have a distinct offering, which is our SVOD service, which is, you could say, the Netflix service of the Nordic regions, and that is priced around $55, $60 a month. But actually, if you look at it, it still has, you know, all our original programming, all our original shows, all the first pay content, and it also has a tiering with all the sports. But it's two distinct offerings, and yes, there's an overlap. So our pay TV customers also get Viaplay, but we also have a distinct customer base that's SVODs.
Your Viaplay offering is basically missing the linear thematic channels, the Discovery,
yes.
Those sorts
so
of things.
So Viaplay doesn't have linear channels, so that's why it's not a virtual pay TV operator.
And Now TV, for instance, is a bit different from that respect, Nick, in that it has a small selection of linear channels. Do you consider that a virtual TV operator, or do you think about it slightly differently?
I don't know. I think sort of think as an industry we get a little bit obsessed with defining things and putting them in different boxes. And if you spoke to any customers, I think they'd just scratch their heads. You know, these are just different TV services, and I guess if we want to have definitions of them, I think loosely people kind of define them as those without infrastructure assets. But you know, Now TV is a service we offer with a different set of infrastructure to our core DTH platform. I think people sometimes forget. Now TV has been around for 5 years now. But it's just a different service. It's a different brand. It has a different kind of contractual relationship with customers in that there isn't one. The pricing and packaging is different. It's a different route to market for a set of content services. So I just think these are just consequences of what technology is allowing businesses to do, and from a customer point of view, they're just different TV services.
And Tony also touched early on in his presentation around the concept of skinny bundles, cut down packages. Now in the US, that's a relatively, I think, new concept. But as an operator in France, Orange offers a whole array. I think your base package is pretty skinny in itself.
Yeah, we're already very skinny in France compared to the US. I'm just talking about TV packages here, but it's fairly cheap in France to get a pretty big, hefty TV package. We have pretty much 3 tiers. The first tiers is between 10 and 15 euros for instance, for beIN Sports or OCS with HBO. We also have a family package with 40 to 50 channels. So you already have a lot of programming in those packages, which is our first tier in the core TV offer. I put aside all the ethnic packages and everything, adult and everything. But and then we have a second tier that is around 20 euros, where you get even more channel in each of these verticals. And then I would say the fat bundle actually for us is when we distribute Canal+. We're a big distributor of Canal+. And here it's more expensive, and as a customer you engage for a 24-month contract, whereas pay TV offer, we don't have any engagement, so it's fairly simple, low risk, low engagement offer for us, but for which we see a quite healthy growth. And I would say so basically we're definitely not a virtual pay TV operator in France. Also, you may be familiar or not with the Sosh brand, which is our digital-focused brand for mobile and broadband in France. We used to have a separate TV proposition on Sosh versus Orange, but a while ago we decided to merge everything, and now we just have one TV platform with one TV proposition, whether you're supposedly younger, digital-focused Sosh, low-budget customer or an Orange customer, and it works pretty well.
Yeah. So if we think about, again, some of the issues that were discussed earlier around, if you look at the US and their typical cable service might be $80, $90 a month plus broadband, whatever it is. And the cut-down services like the Hulus or the Slings, which might be $40, $50. Is there the same potential for those sorts of services in Europe, given where you guys are already positioned with your different offers and the different services that are already in market, that are already quite skinny, I suppose?
Well, there's another one. I'm going to touch on many of my personal frustrations. The US market is totally different, and the US market, there's not been a strong free-to-air constraint, which all operators in Europe tend to operate against. So Sky's offered packages at £20 for over 10 years, and £20 is significantly cheaper than $40, and the skinny in the US is $40. So we've kind of been doing it for a long, long time, and the reason we've had to do that is because in the UK, as well as other European markets, if you want to pay nothing, you can still get some pretty good telly. And there are strong public sector broadcasting ecologies in all of the European major markets. So in some ways, pay TV in Europe has had to be much sharper, both with its proposition and its pricing and packaging, because you have this free-to-air constraint. Because if you charge too much, people will move away. Now, what's happened in the US is they haven't had that ecology. What they've now got is they've got an SVOD ecology, which has come in at almost free, $6, $7, $8, and therefore it's shifted the whole equation, and the gap between $80 and $8 has felt so enormous that suddenly people are like, oh, we need to do something about this. So, in many cases, we'll look to the US and say it's further advanced than Europe. In this instance, I think Europe's been well ahead, but it's been a function of the market context in which we've operated for a long time.
And did the other panelists see that in the markets there?
Yeah, exactly, and I fully agree, and I think the right question to ask, or at least to discuss, is the relevance, right? And I think this is where, when you look to the US, they've had these hugely expensive cable packages with 100, 200 challenge. And the big question, of course, as a consumer, you ask yourself here, what's the relevance of what it actually is that I'm paying for? And as Nick said, in Europe, we've been up against, you could say, this free-to-air market. So we've all been operating with tier 1 packaging. That has been quite interesting, actually. So you got the top 10 channels, basically, with the top viewing. You got that in your basic tier, and you could always choose that option. So I don't think we see the same, the same business of skinny bundles or virtual pay TV operators in Europe. It's not in the same framework as we see it in US for obvious reasons.
No, and I do think there is another reason to it as well. If you have a look at the US, the average top 10 channels or top 20 channels is across the United States the same. But if you have a look in Europe, there is a different demand in Germany, from the Netherlands, from Belgium. So reason for packaging and making sure that you deliver the right content is getting increasingly important in Europe at least. So I do think that's why you see actually different types of packages and different types of content across Europe compared to the US.
Yeah. So coming back to the point that Nick you were asked earlier around, you know, now TV in Spain, that is effectively a virtual TV operator. You've got linear channels. It's at a pretty low price point. You mentioned that's an experiment, I suppose, at least. What do you think would make consumers want to take that? What's the rationale for them picking that over, say, a Telefonica offer?
I think it's in with any kind of market entry, you have to think about what your points of difference are versus the other players. And I think when you look at Now TV or what we've launched in Spain, they are low cost, no commitment, easy access, packages for customers to go for, and you know that's different to some of the other things that exist in those markets. So it's a means to test the demand for that kind of offering in a different territory, and yeah, if that looks like it gains traction and the brand begins to grow, then that could be a stepping stone to other things. But yeah, doing so over IP allows you to access that market without deploying significant amounts of capital.
And Philippe, in your market, do you find a lot of customers taking a basic set of channels from you and then supplementing with on demand? Is that the way it's been trending, or are they still very much linear packages?
Well, the challenge in France, very much like UK, is that we have a lot of programming on FTA.
Yeah.
Even more so than UK, because I believe the rate of people actually paying for TV is lower in France, quite a bit. So basically on the market, we have more people not paying for TV and enjoying the 27 free-to-air channels, or the 200 channels we package for free when you get a set-top box, for which you just pay €3 a month for the rental of the box. So we have more people not paying anything than people paying, but it's increasing. The penetration rate is increasing. So on all our verticals, we're increasing. We've been distributing Netflix on our box for 3.5 years, on our 2 latest generation box, and it's been going very well. It's not been a lot of cannibalization, so it's incremental for the most part, especially for subscriptions. We can see some kind of cannibalization on a la carte premium VOD for a little while, but then the business comes back for a given subscriber after a little while, because in France for 36 months, there's a window where you don't get movies on Netflix. So everything is incremental, and we keep trying to go further to increase penetration. And our latest innovation, so to speak, has been Pickle TV, which is looking at millennials, and is very much, in line with what you were saying, because it has 10 channels. 5 SVOD channels and 5 linear channels with the replay on demand, and it's on all screens, of course, and it does tackle with all the verticals that millennials are interested in. So there's esport with ES1, the very first esport channel in France. There are a lot of series. So we do have several Viacom channels. We have Manga One, we have South Park. We don't have Black Pills yet, sadly enough. I reckon that it's a very good offer. But we do have its cousin, which is Studio Plus, which is on the same 10x10 multi-genre, very high production type of series that is very engaging, etc., etc. And so we launched this in January, and it's gone very well.
So if the panelists were thinking about what a TV operator should look like in a few years' time, virtual or otherwise, you've got the free-to-air channels in Europe, you've got thematic pay channels, you've got perhaps the next generation of channels like those that Andrea was talking about earlier, and your existing premium options and SVOD services. If you had to pick, which of those would you include in there, and which do you think have less of a future in an offer? Does linear still have a future, for instance, if we're looking ahead a few years' time? Should we be thinking about linear online channels at all?
So we have over 10 years of experience in OTT right now, and what we actually see, there is much more drive for, or demand actually from the end consumers to get access to relevant content in small communities, like Jette was saying before. And this is getting increasingly important. So people probably aren't interested in like 200 TV channels. They are interested in what is in their interest groups. So they want to get access to those types of content. And the funny part is, I read this, I thought it was Entertainment Hub, who wrote a very interesting article concluding that every end consumer would be satisfied with 4 kind of applications, which is great. And you see actually that apps are getting more important. So apps as a launching mechanism of OTT information. What it didn't answer, however, is which 4 apps, because probably my 4 apps are much different from your 4 apps or anybody here in the audience, because we have different interest groups. And that's what it's all about, bringing the relevant content to a community and bringing it in a seamless manner where anybody with one remote control could access the data they want to access, or actually the content they want to access. And that's, I guess, what is lying in the hands of the operators right now. That's where they should invest in.
So when you're working with operators, do they want, what sort of apps do they want? Do they want apps to deliver live channels? Do they want VOD libraries?
An app, for me at least, is a launching mechanism. So you shouldn't think of an app like the telephone, a tile which you press on and you get access to that type of information. Even your EPG or UI or anything, your VOD catalog could be an app. It's just getting access to the relevant content. And live linear TV is a different launching mechanism from an application, so which could be esports or whatever. The launching mechanism is different. The end consumer just consumes it as if they are watching live TV. So there's no difference from the experience from an end consumer. Technically, there is only a difference in how you launch the content itself.
What are the other panelists' views on live and the future of, in terms of channels? What's your view on the future of live linear channels, for instance, or at least linear channels? Do your younger consumers want them?
Well, first of all, we see ourselves mostly as storytellers and content producers. Correct, we also have a satellite platform, and actually in Sweden, just to confuse matters, we also run broadband. But nevertheless, so I think, again, it's about relevance, right? And as we saw, and I think many of us showed different graphs around it, I mean, linear still has, a big position. And remember, we're not all millennials yet. I'm surely not a millennial, unfortunately. So there is still room for linear. And I think also interesting, we see more and more scheduled viewing coming back. So even though we're all talking now on demand and over the top and so forth, what we are seeing is that scheduled viewing is actually now coming back on those platforms. But having said that, I mean, in the long term, I guess traditional linear viewing as we know it today will go down. So I live in the Nordics, I'm not there that much, but I live there, and there we see that trend quite tremendously. So it comes back to relevant storytelling, and it comes back to being able to serve this in a manner that excites the audience.
Yeah, I think linear is decreasing, but it's still a big chunk of the viewing time. For pay TV, sports is our main vertical. That's where we have the most subscribers, and sports is mainly consumed live. But even for some non-scripted television, people like to enjoy it as it comes out, and it's some kind of some programs you can talk at the water cooler. So I think live will still. Also, sometimes you're too lazy to search for a piece of content to watch, and you just want to to get the flow of content. So
I'm going to stop for audience questions in a moment. So have a quick think about what you might like to ask the panel on the topic. While you're doing that, I've got another question for the panel in terms of if we think about some of the pressures on linear viewing. depends a little on the country, but some of the research suggests that actually it's the thematic group, it's the Viacoms, the Discoveries of the world that have been feeling a lot of the pressure, more so than maybe the big free-to-air TV companies. If you're thinking about the bouquets and the packages of the future, who are the winners and losers for you as either content producers or distributors as pay TV operators? You know, who do you want in? And you know, if a Discovery comes to you and says, we've got this great idea for a new channel on, you know, a niche topic, you're presumably going to turn them down. Who in 4 years' time is going to be left, and are we going to see consolidation in the channel market?
Well, I would say that's a difficult question, because then again, it's probably more about getting the relevant content to the small communities. And the communities will decide which app will run or which live linear TV channel will be best suited for them. So I guess it depends on the interest groups which are out there, and not so much on the bigger live TV channels.
Nick, for instance, if you as Sky were to say, right, we're cutting all of these secondary and tertiary channel brands, do you think it would have any effect on your customer base?
I think, I mean, from my perspective, I don't have any religion over who might win or who might lose out, and in many respects, it will be those businesses and the customers that will end up deciding. And you know, when we come to have discussions with content partners, we'll look at the, you know, how much value they provide to our customers, which, you know, is loosely going to be correlated to how much time people spend watching with them. You know, the broader trends that we talk about, to me, sort of pointed a little bit towards, you know, over time, you know, the big stuff is still going to keep cutting through, and, you know, Game of Thrones is still going to be important, Premier League football is still going to be important. But as, you know, as the panel's touched upon, you know, they're on demand, and, you know, new providers mean that there's, you know, all the kind of niches that people possibly have and are interested in are going to be pretty well served. So it feels to me that, you know, the people at most at risk are those who are going to get stuck a little bit in the middle, and who previously would have done all right out of the fact that we operated in a world where people used to have 50 to 100 channels, and they'd sort of flick between them, and then if you were somewhere in the middle, you would capture some passing trade. In an on-demand world where there's a load of big stuff and people's personal interests, whatever they might be, and one person's interests are different to the next, are well served, then if you get stuck in the middle, you will probably end up being squeezed. And, you know, over time that will be reflected in the commercial arrangements that the distributors are prepared to make with those players.
And so, Philippe, from your perspective, if I think viewing in France is probably still a little bit stronger than, let's say, in the Nordics, where we've seen greater pressure, but would you be thinking that the thematic channels that you guys deal with should be producing something a little bit more like the Paramount Plus service, where it's a branded premium video on demand experience with a whole array of, you know, high quality content instead of, you know, the linear channels?
Well, yeah, basically we're trying to, you know, to give more comfort and quality to the viewing experience of our customers. So, you know, with Ultra HD, with any kind of on-demand or additional features you can get when you watch TV through any screen with Orange. So yes, we're definitely looking at any opportunities there is to improve the experience, and then we need to figure out the economics. If we have to absorb the extra cost, is it gonna, you know, add attrition or acquisition or whatever? So.
I've got another question for you on costs in a moment and retransmission, but I'm just going to pause for a moment to ask the audience a few questions. I think there's a gentleman up there. If you could say your name and company, that would be super.
Hi, my name's Adam Woodgate. I work for Dubbit. We only work in the kids space with kids entertainment, so obviously they're future audiences. But it's really interesting hearing you. But the one thing whenever we talk to kids and parents of kids is the issue of discoverability. There's more and more content, more and more video being consumed, but the biggest frustration that kids have, which drives them back to their traditional linear viewing habits, is the issue of discoverability. Years and years ago on YouTube, they could find Charlie Bit My Finger or silly videos because there were only a few videos to watch. There's billions out there. There's more and more content all the time. How are you guys going to address the issue of discoverability to solve this problem of frustration that audiences have not being able to surface the content they want?
I'll have a start. I think there's a couple of things that we've done. First, we've launched a dedicated kids app where all of the kids' content is kind of housed, and it's got animations, and kids can set up their characters and believe that it's relatively straightforward for kids to use. And then secondly, I think it's the evolution of the queue interface, and I think the on-demand section is very visually rich, which I think kids respond to a visually rich interface where they can see the images and they can navigate the images and click on specific images to access content. That will become even more friendly when we launch specific kids modes. So the color palette will change, the graphics will be different. And actually also, one of the things that I think we have done quite well is actually our voice search recognises kids' voices really well. One of the things that I've found in my household, I've got young children, is that Alexa sometimes struggles to understand them a little bit, but our voice search is quite effective now. I know I'm not a good example because I work for a TV company, so I shouldn't use my kids as examples, but they by themselves have gravitated towards voice. So when they know there's something they want to find, they'll use voice, and if they're looking for something else, they will go to the on-demand section. And actually, when we look at consumption through our platform, kids is by far and away the demo where the switch from linear to on-demand is moving the fastest.
And when you look at the, just picking up on one of the points there, when you look at the way that people are interacting interacting with Sky as a brand for kids, or are they interacting with the Nickelodeon components of the catalogue?
For the most part, they're interacting with programming brands that they're excited about. So it'll be SpongeBob, it'll be Horrid Henry, and I think for a lot of younger children, the master brands sort of get a bit filtered out, and they will look for a programming brand or characters that they recognise. So
on the subject of that discoverability point, what are the panel's ideas in terms of what's the relevance, I guess, of a channel in this market if people are after program brands, perhaps more so than the channel brands that used to be the marker of how you discovered content? Is the channel still relevant as an operator?
Well, for Pickle TV that I mentioned earlier, we decided, to put forward content, whatever the provider amongst the 10 brands we have is, and they're just, shown by verticals or interests. And then if you want as a user, you can go deep into each of the 10 partners. It's only been 2 months, but we see that a lot of people just stay at the homepage with the cross-partner vision and don't really need at this stage to engage in a specific partner silo.
And Jette and Jeroen, do you see a similar sort of thing? Do people engage with the programming brands themselves, or do you find they still need a channel, an app to go through as their port of call to find something useful?
I think it depends what demographics we're looking at, and I think Nick has a point. I mean, for kids, they attach so strongly to brands like SpongeBob and so forth. So here, of course, it's the characters or it's the heroes that we know. But I mean, for these, let's call them umbrella brands, it's a safe place. People know what's there. I mean, surely for sports and for news, it's common recognized that you go there and you know what's there. I listened to the CEO of Discovery, David Zaslav, some time ago, and I think he has an interesting thinking, because he's now more and more talking about their channels as addressing also superfans, right? So, the Eurosport should be the place with the superfan sports or the niche sports, and as a viewer, you know that if you want to see cycling or whatever other, not that cycling is a special sport, but whatever other niche sport, you would go to Eurosport, right? So I think that's at least where Discovery is coming from, that they are trying to make their channels distinct toward a distinct superfan audience. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to turn back to the audience if there's a question at the back there, I believe. If you could hang on for the mic, that would be great.
Hello, I'm Toby Russell from 3Vision. I was struck that the panelists who are running pay TV services, my feeling is that you don't seem to be too worried about any competition coming through, serious competition coming through virtual pay TV, but obviously the kind of barrier to entry of becoming a pay TV operator, or the barriers are much lower now. And in the US, obviously, Google is in this space with their YouTube TV service. I'm sure Amazon is looking at this closely. Do you think that virtual pay TV operators are going to represent serious competition for you, or not really?
Well, basically, they're both. Those new players are both threats and opportunities. And as I said, we've been distributing Netflix for 3.5 years, and Netflix can be, to some extent, seen as a TV killer. But for us, we just also see it as just another partner with whom we have a distribution deal and on which we make some money, and that helps us, provide more content and more satisfaction on our set-top box to some extent. So if for this aspect, it's a good thing, and possibly if there are new, very powerful players that come on the market, maybe we'll discuss and see if we can integrate them. Then, of course, if they swipe everything and take our place, it's a different story.
But from Nick and Jette, both of your markets have seen, I guess, early virtual pay TV operators enter and disappear. I guess from your perspective, those barriers to entry may be too high for new players. Is that fair to say?
I don't know. I think in general, the way we see it is we compete on content and not on infrastructure. So we focus on bringing the best storytelling and the best content forward. But having said that, I mean, we launched Viaplay our first trial, let's call it that, was in 2009. But we went all in and launched Viaplay in 2011. So surely we have been actively cannibalizing on ourselves to meet this, let's call it, threat and opportunity. So I think we're all addressing it in the market with different offerings, addressing different target segments. But I just think, as Nick started by saying with this panel discussion, that the European market is different than US. In US, everything is bigger and more expensive, and the European market is slightly different setup.
Yeah, and I would say, isn't it the same like when OTT entered the market, everybody was afraid that it would cannibalize. The same for Netflix, onboarding Netflix. Should an operator do that and it would cannibalize their business? In the end, I see an end consumer, and the end consumer just wants to get access to the content they can get. And they are looking for one aggregator saying, hey guys, give me one remote control. I just want to watch my television, and I think it's an opportunity in itself. I wouldn't see it as a clear threat. I would see it as an opportunity for the operators, actually.
So one parallel I think we probably can draw with the US is what's been happening around retransmission lately. So in the US, a number of the big free-to-air broadcasters, the ABCs and CBSs, have been demanding quite hefty fees from operators for the carriage of their channels. Now, Philippe, I'm going to put you on the spot here, and Orange has been in the news lately due to disputes or negotiations with TF1, and I believe M6 is also talking to Molotov TV about charging for access to channels. What does the panel think about the prospects for the free-to-air channels increasingly pushing their way into pay and to be included in some of these package structures?
Well, those free-to-air groups, they M6, TF1, they are losing shares, because now there are more players in the digital terrestrial, and it's more fragmented. So they're losing some advertising revenue, and they've been discussing with us for quite a bit about ways to get extra revenue that would relate to new features and improve quality and everything. So it came to a dire situation where we had to stop the replay for TF1 group channels. Fortunately, it didn't have too much impact on our customers. We didn't have too much impact on satisfaction, too many calls to the customer service. But probably if we had to cut the live feed, it would probably have been a little different, even though we do have digital terrestrial tuners in our set-top boxes. So, we were in quite a good position to negotiate with DFA and with M6 and that's what we ended up doing. So we're very happy that we're out of this situation and that we have deals going on now, and that we can keep providing, the best content and the best experience to our customers. So we're not paying for those free-to-air channels per se, but we're paying for, NPVR, start over, Ultra HD, extended windows for on-demand replay, all that stuff. So it's a pretty good deal for both parties, I would say.
I think it's another parallel we draw that's just total nonsense, to be honest. The US is a totally different market. The US broadcast networks that charge retransmission fees are largely unavailable across the US. So in many cases, the only way in which customers can get access to those services is via cable. That's why the US pay TV penetration has been, it's down at about 80% now, but it historically has been very, very high, because if you want to get those channels, you need to pay. So that kind of commercial relationship seems to make sense. I mean, partly, a lot of the problems of cord cutting that the US now faces is partly driven by that. The greed of retrans fees means that even the skinny bundles are charged at $40 and has created, the opportunity for OTT players to come in much, much lower. In Europe, it's totally different. You can get these services for free, and it seems nonsensical that a platform like Sky would pay for something that customers can otherwise very easily get for free. And we saw the same in Italy with Rai, and we just put a DTT dongle on the back of our boxes, and customers had to switch, and it was slightly more inconvenient for them, but probably less inconvenient than having to pay more money for a service that people on other platforms weren't actually paying for. And you layer on top the fact that these are organisations that are recipients of public funding, either directly in the form of a licence fee or spectrum subsidies, then it makes no sense whatsoever. So I think the parallel is totally different, and that's the reason why we're not going to pay retransmission fees.
So if you were in the position, I suppose, of a new virtual operator entering the market, what would be your advice to them? Would you say, don't even bother with the free-to-air broadcast channels because they're going to try and charge you, and people can get their content anyway, focus on some of the big thematic channels?
I'm not going to be advising. I'm not going to advise a new entrant. New entrants may find that difficult. But then you also have to ask the question: if new entrants to a market find it difficult to enter because incumbents are unwilling to supply, then you've got an innovation challenge that, in theory, should be addressed by the regulatory regime we have in this country of must-offer status. So, if broadcasters want to benefit from public subsidies, then it feels right they have to, the quid pro quo for that is the must-carry status. Now, if you want to drop that, then you've got to move away from the benefits that come with it. But you can't have your cake and eat it.
But that's of course what some of the broadcasters have done in Scandinavia. Many of the previous free-to-air commercial groups have actually moved to a more pay model where they take.
I think that's many years ago, because Scandinavia is actually, there is no free-to-air market at all. We have a model which we call mini-pay. So basically all channels, they get some kind of pay. So we don't have a big free-to-air market that we are competing against. So here it's, I think, MTG has avoided blackout periods. At least, and I've been with MTG for 15 years, so at least for 15 years. And I think it's an ongoing dialogue between the content provider and the distributor and the customer in the end. And I think the broadcaster should charge whatever the perceived value is for the channel, and hopefully the distributor is, has the same view on that. And otherwise, it's obviously a conversation that needs to take place.
Yes, it's right. There are commercial discussions that can take place, and there are things of value that aren't otherwise available for free that pay TV operators are prepared to pay for. So there's a lot of things that we take from both ITV and Channel 4 that we highly value that are pay services that we're willing to pay for. So it's not kind of that there's no conversation to be had. It's just if you're buying something, then you want it to be something that that there's a market price for, and that customers are getting some benefit from paying themselves for it.
Yep. I'm going to open up the floor to questions again, if there are any from the audience. Just pop your hand up. There's the gentleman in the middle here. The microphone is just making its way down.
Hi, it's Jeff Hills from Sky. I think the other thing we mustn't forget is the ad model is very different from US to UK and Europe. The US are kind of subjected to 20 minutes per hour, and if you were watching 20 minutes per hour, Netflix seems pretty good to me, with no advertising. So and whereas here we're considerably, say, lighter, and the way we do advertising is far less in your face than it would be in the US. So again, it's another quite substantial difference to the viewing experience.
So on that note then, I'm going to wrap up the panel in a moment, but I'll ask the panellists. I think we've all already decided on what the answer is going to be, but if we're thinking about the future for virtual TV operators in Europe, yes or no, do we think there's any room for them in the market? If I could go through each of you in turn, Nick, I think presumably.
No, I think there is. I mean,
Yeah.
again, it sort of depends on how hung up we're going to get on the specific definition of them, right? I mean, in principle, Sky operates one, as do a lot of other pay TV businesses in Europe as it is, and I think we will see a lot of different services, different flavours of services that will launch. I think particularly lots of niche services that will serve particular interests, and there will be a market and a place for all of these things to coexist.
Mm-hmm. Philippe, in France?
Not much room, I would say. I mean, there is a quite famous player now in France that's Molotov, with a good experience on multi-screen. But they show high numbers in terms of users or download for applications or whatever. I'm still not sure whether they're managing to transform and sell anything to their users. And actually, if you look at the packages they offer, I mean, they're exactly at the same price points as any pay TV provider. So why switch?
Yeah.
But.
And Jeroen, presumably you don't want any of these virtual TV operators anyway, because you're working with the big pay TV operators.
Well, the only thing I could say, give the consumers what they want. They just want to get access to the content they want. And if we could seamlessly integrate it in a unified search manner, then you give finally what the end consumer wants, and there is no reason for them to switch. So I think it will go hand in hand.
Right.
That's my
Jette, last but not least.
No, I don't have anything else to add to that. I think my colleagues here did a good job.
Well, if I could ask you to join me in thanking the panel for their time, and I'll hand over to that. Thank you very much.